Okay, now we're jumping into definitely a little bit more advanced section before we move into the bonus material. Are some tools that you can utilize to really help you manage the campaigns if you are away from the account for a few days, right? Or if you just have to really dive back into your business. These are things that'll kind of you can put in place that'll help keep things in check, right? They're called rules and scripts. Now, if you remember back to the tools portion that we started off with, right? We were looking at the planning, shared library, bulk actions, measurements, and setup, right? Well, under the bulk actions, you have a couple different options that you're primarily going to use, and that's going to be the rules section, the script sections, and the uploads, right? The rules section is where you're going to find the most value, at least starting out, because you have the ability to actually place particular rules as far as enabling campaigns, shutting them off, changing the budget, changing the bids, increasing bids by certain percentages, or vice versa as far as lowering it. And you can do this at all of these different levels, whether it be the campaign, ad group, and keyword level within the account, or even a lot of the targeting methods such as topic rules, placements, audiences, and even down into some demographics as well. And these are really going to help you kind of control your campaigns when you can't watch them, or especially whenever they just get too robust to be able to manage, at such a granular level. So one thing, and we're just going to set up a real quick campaign rule that'll be pretty easy for just as an example, right? So you click on campaign rule, create a new rule. Now we've got pause campaigns, enable campaigns, send email, or change budgets, right? So let's just say, I want to be notified whenever a campaign is enabled, right? So all enabled campaigns is what this is going to run across. All right. And actually, let's say I want to know whenever one gets above or below a 1% CTR. Right. So I'm going to put a percentage in there. So what it's going to do for me is it's going to send me an email, right, about all enabled campaigns that ever drop below 1% CTR. Now, the defined frequency action is where you basically say how often this runs. So this isn't going to run perpetually throughout the day. Like it's not going to every single, 5 minutes. It's not going to run that unless you put it in there, right? So, but you're kind of limited. You can't run them every minute or every hour. You're limited to either once, daily, weekly, or monthly, right? Like you can run it daily at, let's say, 12 p.m. and it'll run all active campaigns at 12 p.m. It's going to run this rule across all of them. Any campaign that is below a 1% CTR, it's going to send me an email about. Or let's say I want to just pause that campaign, right? Then I'm going to do that daily, run it at 12 p.m., use the data from the previous day, or we can run the same day. And then you also have additional email results right here, right? There's an option up here where I can get an email, or you can basically get an email and notify. These are the notification options for whenever the rule runs. So every time this rule runs, only if there are changes or errors, only if there are errors or no emails, right? So it can no email, I'm never going to get notified. If it's every time this rule runs, it means every time at 12 p.m., I'm going to get an email from Google that says, hey, this campaign was shut up, or this campaign wasn't shut off, or nothing was ran because, everybody was above a 1% CTR. Now, you can also get it only if there are changes or errors in the account. So if they do make a change, pause a campaign, anything like that, then it'll send me. Or if there are errors, like if it runs and it errors out, right? For one reason or another, right? We just don't have any active campaigns. You can also enable, send email, or change budgets. Now, the changing budgets, as far as let's say, all enable campaigns, I want to decrease the budget by 50%. It's set a lower budget limit, right? So I'm not going to go below $5, whatever. And you can do the same condition down here. So if the CTR drops below 1%, it's going to run it every day at 12 p.m. Same day. If it's below 1%, it's going to drop the budget down by 50%, right? If the budget is $15, it's going to drop it to $7. If it's $8, it's going to drop it to $5, right? Because that's my lower budget limit there. But again, it's going to either lower to this lower budget limit, or it's going to just cut it in half. And you can hit preview the rule, and it'll tell you whether or not it'll run it. So in this account, it's not going to run it. Now you do have to name the rule. Where do I name it? So drop by 50%. Okay. Then we just do save rule. Okay. So now again, you can run those particular levels. If I want to do an income range, select an office, enable income ranges, exclude income ranges from ad group. Let's say, well, all enable income ranges. If a particular income range hits a cost of over $100, like let's say I want to spread out my budget across all income ranges, and you want to do greater than or equal to $100. You can run that daily at noon, same day. There, but the scenario in this is how this is going to work is it's going to exclude income ranges from ad groups, right? So all enabled income ranges, all enabled and pause income ranges, or income ranges in the selected campaign, or income ranges in selected ad groups, right? So if I do all enabled, it's going to be the account wide. If I do the campaign, it's just going to be in the campaign that I select from this particular option, right? And just like on the left-hand side is all eligible ones, on the right is all selected ones. All right, so if I want to select the car warranty, I can do it specific, or I can even go down to the ad group level and do it that far. All right. So we'll do the car warranty there. And then what's going to happen with that is every day at noon, it's going to run and it's going to look at car warranty. It's going to look at all the ad groups that are under car warranty. And if any of them basically have an income range on any of those ad groups that is exceeding $100, right? Or any of the campaign actually is where these are going to be set. So any of the income ranges within the campaign level, so whether it be, bottom 50%, 30 to 40%, so on, any of those income ranges, if any of them have spent over $100, then it's going to pause that particular income range. Right. And it's going to leave it paused throughout that day. You actually have to go back in and re-enable it, right? Otherwise you have to set another rule that says re-enable it the following next day. Okay. So that's where the rules kind of I'm a little hesitant sometimes to use them, just because if it pauses at a particular income group because it did bad one day, what's to say it's not going to do bad the next day? So I almost create myself double work, where as long as I'm in the account on a daily basis, then I can manually make that adjustment. But again, if it's something where, I'm ingrained in my business, I'm having to manage other employees, many other scenarios that take you away from the computer and being in it on a daily basis, the automated rules can be very, very effective tools to make sure that nothing really, really bad happens, or even if something really good happens, that you take advantage of it, right? The other alternative would be in here to be, if we do a campaign rule, right? Change budget on campaign, all enabled campaigns, increase budget by 50% up to $500, right? You want to kind of set a limit in there to make sure you're not, but the condition is if their conversion say the conversion rate is greater than 5%, right? Then it's going to go in and automatically change my budget to increase it and make sure by 50% up to $500. And what I mean by $500 and why you put this is because if you have, let's say, $100 budget in there, right? Or let's say you have a $300 budget, then it's going to run this budget every single day, right? And if every single day throughout the week you increase it by 50%, then pretty soon after after about 3 days, you're going to exceed that $500 threshold, right? And you may not be prepared to spend that. So that's why it's always best to put these in here, and you have always either upper bid limits or lower bid limits, depending on whichever rule you're setting within here. Now, again, we're going to run this at 12 p.m. So based off of the same day, if we're at a 5% conversion rate that day, which a lot of these conversion rates you'll have to set based off of the previous day's action, because it takes up to 18 hours for the conversion to roll in. So a lot of these are going to be, if you're going to do a conversion rule, it's going to be set off the previous day's budget. But if we're on Monday and we're at $300 and it's going to increase it by 150, that means the next day we're going to be at $450. If it runs that same rule because we hit 5% conversion rate on Monday as well, then automatically it's going to bump that budget up to $500 because it's set a max. But if we didn't have that max in there, then it would bump it up to $600 or $650. So that's the reason why you set that in there, is just to make sure you're controlling as you scale up. And it's always just kind of best to plan for the worst, right? Because depending on what the particular action that you're trying to increase the budget for, it may be something that could go up really, really quickly. And that's why you always want to kind of position yourself within the upper and lower budgets, just like with using a CPA rule or a ROAS rule, where you have cost per CPC limiters in there. Those are always good to kind of control and make sure that something doesn't happen out of the ordinary, where you blow through $1,000, or all of a sudden your budget is at $1,000 a day and you don't have room to pay for that quite yet because you haven't sold all the products. So those are just some rules and kind of some information on setting up on the rules, right, basically, and some guidelines and some best practices for setting up rules. Now, scripts are a little bit more complex, right? Scripts are actually where you actually write more of a JavaScript code within them. So let's go back to the scripts here. So as I've got my script in here, you see they're JavaScript codes that are going to return particular actions and force things to happen within the account. This particular one is all about if an ad goes because of a disapproval because of a capitalization error, it fixes that capitalization. That's one of the only rules that I find valuable. I've included a link to a nice article that this girl wrote about there's 100 different scripts that are the best for Google Ads. I don't typically use a lot of them, so I'm going to let you kind of be the judge on whether or not you want to use them or not. If you get to where you're handling and managing, multiple products, 5, 10, 15 products within a particular AdWords account, you're getting into where you're having to actually manage, hundreds, 200, 1,000 keywords. These scripts can be helpful, just like the rules, but they're just basically a little bit more technically backed, rule-based adjustments that are going to be made within the account. And then the final place that you're going to maybe operate is going to be the uploads. We're going to cover this more in the analytics portion, so I won't cover on a lot of it right now. But on the uploads portion, you have the ability to look at a template and download a template of what they look like for uploading conversions. I'll download that real quick just to show everybody. This kind of gives you what the columns would look like as an example. We'll wrap those. All right, so there's some data you need, like campaign state, campaign delivery method. There's some very campaign specific details, and these are what the information would look like that you're putting in here, right? The uploads, honestly, I would recommend utilizing the Google Sheets the best, because sometimes what happens whenever you're uploading the conversions, whenever you're putting them from a text editor to a Word sheet or any, maybe a text doc to, WordPad doc, I've run into some problems in the past, and I know this sounds like a really, really weird scenario, but where my comma wasn't the right comma. I thought all commas were the same in the English language, but apparently they have varying lengths depending on what text editor tool you're using, or if you're using an HTML tool and pasting it into a text tool and those kind of things. So those are a little bit more advanced, and we'll dive more into those in the analytics portion. So if you haven't picked up your accelerated copy, definitely upgrade so we can get you, diving into more of the display and really scaling a lot more of that top funnel, and really putting your conversions and your ROAS into hyper gear, right? But that's really some helpful tools within the bulk actions menu that'll kind of help you manage and keep some of this in check if you're not always as in these accounts as much as I am, or as much as somebody that's not fully ingrained in their small business can be sometimes. So I hope this was really valuable for you. We're going to jump into the bonus section. I'm going to give you some really valuable tools that'll help you really scale these campaigns, and it'll also help you with some of the admin tools in building them out and placing the codes that'll kind of alleviate some of the hassle there. So let's jump into the next section and build on that AdWords knowledge. See you there.